Today, we're diving into the story of Vasily Arkhipov, a man who some have called the man who saved the world. It's this incredible and, for a long time, totally unknown story about one guy whose decision, under just unbelievable pressure, may have single-handedly prevented World War III.
So let me ask you a question. What do you think was the most dangerous moment in all of human history? Seriously, think about it. You might picture a tense standoff in a presidential bunker or some command center. But according to a lot of historians, that single, most dangerous moment, it actually happened deep, deep beneath the waves.
And this right here is where it all went down. This is the Soviet submarine B-59. We're talking October 1962, the absolute peak of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this sub, well, it found itself right in the middle of this insane global standoff. It was totally isolated, cut off from everyone, and it had the power to kick off a full-blown nuclear war.
All right, let's set the stage. The date is October 27th, 1962. The entire world is just holding its breath. You've got the US and the Soviet Union in this unbelievably tense standoff over nuclear missiles in Cuba. This day, October 27th, would go down in history as Black Saturday for a very, very good reason.
So, way out in the middle of the Caribbean, the B-59 gets spotted. And it's not just spotted. An entire American naval group, we're talking 11 destroyers and an aircraft carrier, has it totally cornered. Imagine that. You're deep underwater, completely cut off, and you are surrounded.
Then, the Americans start dropping what they call signaling depth charges. Now, these were just small explosions, basically meant to say, hey, surface now. But here's the thing. Inside the B-59, the crew has no idea they're just signals. They've been out of radio contact with Moscow for days, so all they know is that their sub is being rocked by explosions.
So put yourself in the shoes of the submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky. From his perspective, what else could this be? War must have started. And so he makes a terrifying call. He decides to launch their T-5 nuclear torpedo. This thing was no joke. It was powerful enough to wipe out the entire naval group above them and, without a doubt, trigger a massive nuclear war.
But here's the twist. Launching that weapon wasn't solely the captain's decision. It required the okay from another officer, a man whose personal history had, in a strange way, prepared him perfectly for this one, single, world-altering moment.
You see, on most Soviet subs, firing a nuke needed two people to agree, the captain and the political officer. But the B-59 was different. It was the flagship of its flotilla. That meant a third officer had to give the go-ahead, the chief of staff. And that man was Vasily Arkhipov.
And Arkhipov's backstory is just, wow. It's key to this whole thing. Just 1 year before this, he'd already been through a nuclear nightmare on a different sub, the K-19. Its reactor coolant system totally failed, they had no radio contact, and Arkhipov and his crew had to figure out a way to stop a full-on meltdown. They did it, but it was a disaster. Many of them died from radiation exposure. The crucial takeaway here is that Vasily Arkhipov, unlike anyone else in that control room, had already stared a nuclear catastrophe right in the face and survived.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's jump right back into that sweltering, claustrophobic control room on the B-59. The captain has given the order, the political officer agrees. The world is literally seconds away from nuclear war.
So you've got 2 against 1. On one side, Captain Savitsky and the political officer. They are absolutely convinced war has already started. And on the other side, all by himself, stands Vasily Arkhipov, saying, no, we don't launch.
So you've got to be asking, why did his single no matter so much? Well, 2 big reasons. First, his rank. As flotilla chief of staff, he was technically the captain's equal in this specific decision. And second, his reputation. Everybody on that sub knew the story of the K-19 disaster. They knew Arkhipov was the guy who kept his head when things got, well, when they got as bad as they could possibly get.
And in that moment, with all the heat and the explosions and the chaos, Arkhipov's calm logic won out. He actually managed to talk the captain down. He persuaded him that instead of launching a weapon that would end the world, they should surface, break radio silence, and just wait for orders from Moscow to find out what was really going on.
So you'd think, right, that they'd get back home and be treated like heroes. I mean, they just prevented a global catastrophe. But their reception was the complete opposite.
When they finally got back to the Soviet Union, the crew was met with reprimands. Their bosses were absolutely furious that they had surfaced and given away their position to the Americans. Their caution, the very thing that saved the world, was seen as a total failure.
And get this is just a staggering quote. A Soviet admiral actually told the men, "It would have been better if you'd gone down with your ship." Can you imagine? It's no wonder that, according to his wife, Arkhipov almost never talked about what happened. He felt like his own command just never understood what they'd been through.
And so for decades, this entire story was just buried. Nobody knew about it. But then, as the Cold War started to end and archives began to open up, a completely different take on what Arkhipov did started to come to light.
We started to hear from the American side. People like Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who was an advisor to President Kennedy, confirmed just how unbelievably close we came. He said the Americans had no idea those Soviet subs were even carrying nuclear torpedoes. If the B-59 had fired, the U.S. response would have been immediate, massive, and absolutely nuclear.
And that brings us to this amazing quote from Thomas Blanton, the director of the U.S. National Security Archive. He called Arkhipov the man who saved the world. I mean, think about the contrast there. You have the Soviet admiral saying it would have been better if they died, and now you have historians calling him the man who saved the world. It's like history finally caught up with what really happened that day.
Vasily Arkhipov himself passed away in 1998. He died of kidney cancer, which was very likely a tragic result of all that radiation he was exposed to back during the K-19 disaster. But his legacy, his story, it lived on. And in 2017, he was posthumously given the very first Future of Life Award for safeguarding the future of all of us.
Okay, so it's an incredible story, right? But, we always have to look at the whole picture. So how certain are we that this is exactly how it all went down? What's the historical evidence actually look like?
Well, this is where it gets a little complicated. A historian named Sergei Radchenko notes that a lot of this story comes from oral testimony, from the crew members talking about it years after the fact. And, maybe more importantly, when the Russian Ministry of Defense finally declassified a bunch of documents about the mission back in 2022, there was no mention of this heated argument at all. Now, that doesn't prove it didn't happen, but it does mean we're relying heavily on the first-hand personal accounts of the men who lived through it.
So whether every single detail is perfectly accurate or has been maybe a little bit shaped by memory over the years, the heart of the story is still this powerful lesson about human judgment under impossible pressure. And it really leaves you with a final, kind of chilling question, doesn't it? I mean, Vasily Arkhipov's story was kept secret for decades. It makes you wonder how many other moments like this have happened. How many times has the world been saved, pulled back from the brink by some quiet, unsung hero whose name we'll just never know?